bring to this body the conference committee report to House Bill 19, the state's FY24 general appropriations budgets, $32.4 billion. It funds every agency from this body, the legislature, to veterans at the end, and the services that we provide for our veterans.
The one thing the legislature is mandated to do, the budget, makes it to the Senate floor on the last day of the session. Good evening and welcome to our special 1 hour Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. 40 legislative days in the making, and it's finally here, sine die, the last day for the Georgia General Assembly to pass laws in 2023. Each chamber came into the day jam-packed with bills to review and consider for votes. We'll run down all of the action of the day and what to expect tonight. Two journalists who cover politics for the AJC will offer background and analysis throughout the hour. And if anything major happens during our time on the air, we'll bring it to you right away. But we want to get right to the Gold Dome, where sine die is still underway, and our Capitol correspondent Rochelle Ritchie is standing by. Hi, Rochelle.
Well, hi, Donna. As you can imagine, it's a very busy day here at the Capitol as members of both the House and the Senate push and make arguments for their bills. Now, as you mentioned, we did see some movement and compromise on the 2024 fiscal budget, and in the House, a pretty lengthy debate over cash bail.
The news of the day started this morning outside of Chambers when the Select Appropriations Committee agreed on the 2024 fiscal year budget. But HB 19, the new version, now in harmony with the House version, didn't make it to the Senate until late this afternoon.
I bring to this body the conference committee report to House Bill 19, the state's FY24 general appropriations budgets, $32.4 billion. It funds every agency from this body, the legislature, to veterans at the end, and the services that we provide for our veterans.
Changes included.
Hope is at 100%. The Hope numbers, the way we were able to fund Hope public and private at 100% was by using updated numbers of students. Our USG population has been declining, as you know. So that helped us save with a little bit of savings there, and by updating those numbers, we think we can make both of those fit in the program. Hoteling, a major focus of this body. Monies in this budget address hoteling. Substantial funding at DHS to continue preparing for pandemic unwinding. The task that we have placed on DHS, though, that's been placed on all states to unwind after the pandemic, though, is daunting. At DBHDD, $117 million towards initiatives concerning mental health and developmental disabilities. The conference committee's final version has $47 additional million on top of the additions that were made for the governor.
But there was some compromise when it came to raises for law enforcement officers.
Most state officers receive a $6,000 pay raise. Many others receive a $4,000 raise.
The bill was passed 54-1 and immediately sent to the House. But earlier in the day, there was a dispute with the House as the Senate insisted on their position, the hotly debated truck weight bill, HB 198. At dispute, the cargo weight of trucks and the types of materials that will get the higher allowances. The two chambers will, again, have to find a compromise in committee on their two positions before the session ends tonight. The House substitute of Senate Bill 222, also referred to as the Zuckerbucks bill, came back to the Senate with changes. The bill would keep county election boards from accepting outside donations.
That section creates an independence for the state election board. So the state election board is an independent budget unit that is associated or affiliated with the Secretary of State for administrative purposes, but is not under the control of the Secretary of State. It provides for the ability for the state election board to be an independent body and administer its own affairs.
The shame of this bill is you are raising taxes on all the locals because this body has put all these requirements on the locals. They are all unfunded. And now you're saying we will not let you be enterprising, be innovative, be creative, and try to, that all red counties could apply for too, fill some budgetary gaps. When the General Assembly considers the fiscal impacts of the laws it deliberates, we should be considering the financial impact of both revenues and expenses. And SB 222 seeks to reduce revenues from supplemental funding to local governments, causing the local governments to have to make a net increase in expenditures.
The bill passed along party lines, 32 to 21. The controversial bill, SB 63, earned a lengthy debate in the House. The bill would require judges to set cash bails for violent crime.
This bill really, again, to sum it up, has two key objectives: ensuring that cities and counties that have established blanket no cash bail policies, this bill addresses that issue. It says that criminal violations, including municipal violations that are subject to confinement, will require an individualized bond hearing before a judge. There'll be no more catch and release on municipal violations that are subject to confinement.
Over and over again, we hear about the rights of criminals. We hear about, oh, this is going to disenfranchise a certain group of people. I submit to you that by passing House Bill or Senate Bill 63, we're going to protect people in this state.
The bill adds additional offenses such as street racing to the list of bail-restricted offenses. Some Democrats argue the bill puts privilege over justice.
In our current criminal system, you're treated better if you're rich and guilty than if you're poor and innocent. Therefore, wealth, not culpability, is impacting our justice outcomes.
This is yet another bad bill that the appearance of which is to look like we are being tough on crime. Again, we have the capacity as legislators in this information age to craft good policy based on an understanding of what works best.
But for other Democrats, clarity and safety garner support for SB 63.
If we go to line 20, it says, except as provided, the judge of any court of inquiry may, by written order, establish a schedule of bails, including local ordinances. The judge is deciding, not this piece of paper. This is saying the accused must appear before a judge, one, before the bail can be set or even released. Do we want to release somebody that committed murder without bail? Robbery? Because this is what's on the paper. Do we want to release somebody for kidnapping without bail, rape, child molestation, sodomy, assault, battery, carjacking? People are carjacked in my community often. People in my community would be offended if we let somebody out for carjacking without bail.
The bill passed 95 to 81, but the Senate rejected the changes, and it now goes to a joint committee. And a surprise about face for SB 233, which would provide parents a $6,500 voucher to be used toward private school tuition. But after lunch, the bill was tabled.
I move to recommit SB 233 back to rules.
The bill was recommitted to rules with a 97 to 73 vote.
And Donna, of course, we have a number of interviews coming up within the hour, but for now, that is my Capitol Report. I'm going to send it back to you.
Thanks. We will see you again soon, Rochelle. Joining me are just two of a large team of AJC reporters covering the General Assembly. There are political insiders, Greg Bluestein, journalist, author, and one of the writers of the AJC's Jolt newsletter and one of the hosts of the Politically Georgia podcast. The other host is AJC political columnist Patricia Murphy, and she's editor of the Jolt. So it's always good to have you guys on with me. Thank you so much. Let's talk about the day. So it has, to me, different from in recent past years. How would you describe the way the day is going to people who weren't down there?
I would say it's a day of fits and starts.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot of hurry up and wait. On the surface, it seems like things are calm and normal, but behind the scenes, it's chaos. There's a lot of frenzied back and forth. I'm getting texts about some of the behind the scenes things as we speak right now. So it is it's still a rush, And things start really picking up at night and the sun dies. And so expect a lot of action in the next few hours.
You describe it the same way?
Very similar. My metaphor is the calm before the storm, but really the calm in front of the storm. What we see on the chamber floors are debate back and forth, taking some time off. Let's have a debate about kind of a silly side matter. But we know behind closed doors, the House leadership, the Senate leadership, a lot of these are conversations just between Republicans, occasionally butting heads among Republicans as well. They are really hammering out these final details. We've been told by members that they start to really pay attention around 9 o'clock on sine die, because that's when the bills just start to fly across their desks. They have to read them, absorb them quickly. A lot of times it's new text, new bills, things that they may or may not have seen before. And so they said that they really try and pay very, very close attention. And then it just is fast and furious at that point.
Yeah, and so today we saw times where, well, at one point in the Senate, let's just, after the budget was passed, let's just end it. So a little bit of fun maybe there.
I think that was from State Senator Josh McLaurin, who might be on this program later. And I think part of it is joking, but part of it was serious. Once the Senate lawmakers passed the budget, that is their only constitutional duty. And there are a lot of people in that building who were seconding Josh McLaurin's motion at that moment to just go home.
It was like sort of like, ooh, let's kind of, take a break there. Okay, well, let's head back to the Capitol, where Rochelle Ritchie has an interview with the Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones. Hi, Rochelle.
Hi, Donna. Yes, I'm here with the Lieutenant Governor, and we're going to get right into this because I know you have a very, very busy day. It's going to be a very long night. I wanted to ask you about your push for hospitals to be able to build in smaller communities without the certificate of need. That's something that you've pushed for quite a bit, but we haven't heard much about it today. Are you hopeful that that's going to come back up or have some sort of movement?
It's unfortunately, it doesn't look like we're probably going to get there tonight, but it is a measure that I am passionate about. I'm from rural Georgia. I'm from a county that has less than 25,000 people in it, and there's probably about the bill was set that it would address counties that had less than 50,000, which is about 112 counties. And I've watched the certificate of need process really slow local communities, either from being able to build new facilities or not be able to get facilities at all because of that process. So I think it's something that does need to be reformed, and it does need to be addressed. But it doesn't look like it's going to happen this year. But it is a 2-year process, and so we'll work on it in the all season and see what happens.
Now, staying within the theme of healthcare, HB 520, that is another mental health. We haven't seen anything happening with that today, which is pretty surprising because it has so much bipartisan support. Do you think there's still time for something to happen with that bill as well?
Well, when we got 520, when we had a fiscal note, I asked for a fiscal note, it came with about a $72 million price tag. And so we've had a lot of members on the Senate side. I know it was very popular on the House side. We've had a lot of members on the Senate side that were having a hard time in swallowing that number. Look, we're all for mental health, and we're all for wanting to do things. Obviously, we passed 1013 last year, which was a good start. We're probably going to try to get something out of the 520 bill done tonight, but it's not going to be the 70-page 520 bill that was sent to the Senate.
Yeah, and I know that you were also trying to at least bring sports betting to a vote, but there are some rumblings that Democrats are withholding their vote on sports betting because of the gender-affirming bill. What is your reaction to that?
I've talked to the leadership and the Democratic caucus on the Senate side, and there's been various things. At one time, I had them on board, and then all of a sudden we lost a few, and so and it's been for different reasons, but yeah, we'll keep talking. We'll keep talking till midnight, and something may happen. But it's gone back and forth. Sometimes we would have got about half the Republicans in the Senate that would like to do it, and then of course you need 29 votes, and so you would have to have a strong showing from the Democratic Party in order to get it done.
And they're wrapping me up, but I do want to give you just 10 seconds to tell me, how was it presiding over the Senate for the first time this session?
Oh, it was great. I mean, I enjoyed it. I've served in the body, and I'm very comfortable in the Senate, and it was great working with the Speaker, and had a good working relationship with the executive branch as well as the House, and so it was a good session, and I think we're going to end with some good things, and so.
Right.
So yeah, it'll be good.
All right, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And Donna, I'm going to send it back to you in the studio.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. So I want to get reactions from you guys. So you earlier today reported on the certificate of need and what's happening with trying to get the hospital built in not only Jackson County, but he said 112 counties.
Yeah, Donna, that was such a newsy interview by Rochelle.
Yeah.
Because he made news on a couple fronts, but one was his acknowledging that it's a really tough fight to get this hospital deregulation bill passed this year, especially with the opposition from House leaders and the governor. But the other big part that he mentioned among the several newsy items was mental health reform.
Yeah.
You just heard the Lieutenant Governor acknowledging that the entire package will not be passing this year unless something dramatic changes. Instead, there might be some piecemeal parts of it, here and there that slide through on other bills, but the overall reform package that the House leader, House Speaker John Burns and other House leaders advocated for does not look like it's going to pass.
Yeah, we're going to hear from Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, who was one of the sponsors on that bill, coming up later in the show. Let's talk about that. That's $72 million, he said, hefty price tag, but the House felt it was worth it to go ahead and push for that.
Yes, that's a bill that passed the House 163-3, so there was not significant opposition to that from really any quarter of the state House. When it went over to the state Senate, even in Senate committee, there was debate about it, there was conversation, no major objections raised to it during the Senate committee hearing, but an acknowledgement from the committee chairman, Ben Watson, who said, we're not going to be voting on this bill today in committee. That's been decided. So that had been decided, it seemed like, by Senate leadership. So that's a major blow to mental healthcare advocates, also to people who were pushing for it really on behalf of Speaker Ralston, knowing that that was his big priority. I really want to congratulate Rochelle for that interview because she really hit all the highlights, including on sports betting as well.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit. It doesn't look like that's going anywhere. There's been a lot of back and forth on that too, especially with the Democrats upset about something.
Yes, that's right. The Lieutenant Governor did not talk about the Republicans who are opposing that bill as well. We have heard from religious conservatives, even Georgia Faith and Freedom this morning was whipping against that and reaching out to individual senators to say, we do not want sports betting. This is against what we believe is the right thing to do, going to other conservative members. But the Lieutenant Governor did say, we're going to keep talking. He did not say that that's not happening tonight. So it has a very high mountain to climb to get through tonight. But again, not an acknowledgement that it won't pass, but especially on a couple of these bills, it's a 2-year process. And it is a 2-year process. So I think, especially on certificate of need, we will continue to see the Lieutenant Governor push for that over and over and over.
Yeah, it kind of looked like earlier in the week that that was it. It was dead. And he wrote an op-ed in your paper.
On certificate of need, yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote an op-ed saying that he was made an offer by unspecified lobbyists that he could get the hospital he wanted in his home county of Butts County in Middle Georgia if he just relented on a broader deregulation push. And he said that he said no to those lobbyists and he's going to continue to fight on this issue. And the other thing that we're watching too, as Patricia said, he said he wanted a verdict on sports betting this year. And he doesn't have those 29 votes in the Republican caucus. He needs that Democratic support and doesn't look like he's going to get it.
Okay, well, we'll be watching closely tonight. But right now, standing by at the Capitol to join us is Georgia Governor Brian Kemp. Thank you so much for joining us on Lawmakers, Governor.
Hey, happy signing day, everybody. It's good to be with you.
Thank you so much. I want to get into a few of your priorities, and one of them was the school voucher bill to allow parents to have more than $6,500 to put children in private schools or homeschools. It faced an especially tough time in the House. Did you get involved in resolving that at all? Have you been involved in that process?
Well, really, I think when you look back at the whole session, I mean, our priorities going into session was helping Georgians fight through 40-year high inflation. We've done that already with the second income tax rebate, property tax relief, a lot of other things that we've done to help Georgians fight through bad policies in Washington, D.C. We're also focused on keeping people safe and keeping our children educated, so I certainly am supportive of Senate Bill 233. I appreciate the Senate's work on that. I really didn't say a whole lot about that bill most of the session because I felt like the legislators were having very thoughtful debate. we were listening to concerns on all sides of the issue from both camps, and I think they've reached a good consensus on a bill. But I mean, they still got to get the votes in the House. I know they're working on that, so we'll see where that goes the rest of the night.
Well, let's talk about some of your other priorities. And you mentioned some, the tough on crime legislation, cash bails, other things, fully funding the Hope Scholarship. Your floor leaders, they've had some pushback on a few of these. So how are you feeling overall about some of those priorities?
Oh, listen, I think our agenda has moved very well. The Senate just passed our gang bill, which the Lieutenant Governor had, language on that too. So we're looking forward to that getting done tonight. We've already done a lot of other things in regards to going after gangs. The First Lady's human trafficking bill passed again with only one vote in the whole General Assembly against it. And so a lot of the initiatives, the education pieces that we've done, have been passed, school security and other things that people are focused on. And that's certainly an important issue in light of what we've seen over the last few days up in Nashville, and our thoughts and prayers continue to go out to those folks.
Okay, I do want to ask you, we're still hearing there's a possibility, maybe slim, that something will come out on sports, the sports betting bill. What are your thoughts?
I don't know. I haven't been hearing much about that. That's not been a priority of mine, other than if that does get passed, I want the money to go to fund the Hope Scholarship. My number one goal is to continue to protect Hope and make sure that our students of today and tomorrow and the generations to come will have access to that great program that Zell Miller created. I know that bill has died a couple of times this session. I haven't seen or heard a lot of momentum. But, look, you never know what's going to come back the last few hours, and that's certainly a possibility that there may be a vote later tonight. We'll just have to wait and see. There's a lot of issues like that are out there. The truck weights bill, Senate Bill 233, obviously sports betting. There's hemp bill that people are concerned or interested in, and a lot of other things. So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a long rest of the night with a lot to do and a short time to get there.
Well, I know traditionally you go to both chambers and you say a few words. Are you planning to do that? And if so, what are you going to say?
Well, I'm going to tell them, thank you for protecting and fighting for the agenda that we all campaigned on. I talked about that in the State of the State, that Georgians had given us our marching orders. And, we accomplished a lot of those things in the amended budget and with pieces of legislation that we've already gotten passed. My message to the chambers would be to finish strong and let's get these things done that we need to do, that we made promises to do. And thankfully, as far as my agenda goes, we've done that already. But we want the legislators to be successful too. We've done our best job when we're working together here, and I'm committed to continuing to do that the rest of the night and the next 3 years.
Has your influence been more in the background this session than in past sessions?
Well, I know there's been a lot written about that. I haven't had to weigh in on a lot of things because the agenda that I campaigned on, most people supported, including the Democrats. I mean, if you look at the amended budget vote, the final vote was broadly bipartisan on the bills on tax relief and property tax relief and a lot of the other things that we've done in regards to schools and keeping people safe. We've had support on, so I haven't had to weigh in on a lot of those issues. Next year may be different, but that's just where we are this year. I think it shows that we really had an agenda that a lot of people on both sides of the aisle could get behind, and we didn't have to, so-called flex our muscles too much. We do have a little bit of concern with some of the clouds that we're seeing on the horizon. I'll talk a little bit about that more financially tonight with even the Fed now is predicting a recession in 23, so we've got to continue to be fiscally conservative when it comes to our budgeting and make sure that we have efficient government to fight through tough times that may be ahead of us.
Well, we'll be paying attention. Thank you so much, Governor, for joining us on Lawmakers.
Have a great night. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, Patricia, let's start with your thoughts on what the governor had to say.
I thought it was interesting when you asked him about him playing a more behind-the-scenes role this session, and he certainly has been more behind the scenes. We have not seen him out giving speeches, calling on lawmakers to do something publicly. He has been doing more something, bringing members into his office, reaching out, saying, we would like you, so he did start to whip on some bills. But he's right, a lot of the pieces that he campaigned on have been broadly popular, but with Georgia voters and among lawmakers. So you look at the budget, you look at the tax credits, the teacher pay raises, the police pay raises, law enforcement. All of those things were broadly popular, and they have moved very quickly. So he really didn't need to get in and start whipping votes and cracking heads. That just wasn't necessary. He has been getting involved more, though, particularly on vouchers. That was a really interesting move that he made to get involved in that fight, because it's something that people were wondering. It was not on his agenda when he put forward his agenda at the beginning of the year, but it very quickly became quite important to him. And his decision to get involved, I think, made a very big difference in the momentum that it's picked up.
Any thoughts from you?
Donna, Patricia's exactly right. The fact that the governor got in on the school voucher bill is a huge step for him. We hadn't heard him specifically endorse this legislation for $6,500 per student vouchers that would go to private school tuition or homeschool expenses. And it's also a test of his clout. He comes into this legislative session after a resounding re-election victory with high approval ratings. Now let's see, he's going to have to see how far that takes him under the Gold Dome.
Yeah. So, well, we'll talk about more of that and so much more. Coming up, we'll hear from House Minority Leader James Beverly and more. Stay with us.
Lawmakers is made possible by Georgia Farm Bureau. With over 80 years of helping everyone understand the importance of agriculture in our state. After all, ag is Georgia's #1 industry. Food and fiber production represents over $74 billion in output of Georgia's strong economy. The Georgia Farm Bureau legislative team works to represent producers across Georgia at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
Here's what's new this month with Passport.
Whichever way I turn, there's a trap. Let's set this palace on fire.
She's to be married. She is not married yet.
It's never a burden to love or give. The mother is at the heart of everything we do.
These and all your favorite shows are available with Passport. Support your PBS station and stream more with Passport on the PBS app.
Community. Learning, working, playing, celebrating. Doing life is always better together. At GPB, we aim to provide you with the tools to be able to do life together well. Our mission to educate, inform, and entertain inspires everything from our wide range of programming to our stimulating radio conversations to our fun in-person events. We've got something for everyone. Visit gpb.org/community to learn more about our upcoming events.
We care about things that affect the lives of every American.
We are there at the front lines
to get to the heart of what really matters in every issue.
This country has not seen this in 80 years.
This extraordinary moment in American history.
You're making such a huge impact.
Trust is at the heart of what we do.
Welcome back to Lawmakers on this sine die, the final day, the 40th day of the Georgia legislative session for 2023. And with me are two of my favorite people to have on a day like this to talk about these things, Patricia Murphy and Greg Bluestein with the AJC. So we've got some time here. Let's talk about some of what we've seen over these past 40 days, some of the highlights of the session. And we'll start with you, Patricia.
So we were just talking about what Governor Kemp had done to move some things forward. He also took a really important step earlier this session to essentially kill the Buckhead City movement. The effort in Buckhead, the very wealthy neighborhood in Atlanta, to split off and create its own city out of the city of Atlanta. That, for the first time this year, got a committee hearing, a committee vote, and then was scheduled for a vote on the Senate floor. Governor Kemp made it very clear that he had no interest in that passing. He has been working with Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens on a number of sort of joint initiatives having to do with public safety. So the governor's decision to get involved in that and make it very clear that he would not sign that bill was a very important move for him on the defensive rather than an offensive move. And that was a critical move and something easy to forget about now that we're at day 40, but it was one of the biggest stories at the beginning of the session.
Yeah, a big sigh of relief for a lot of people after that happened, and then trying to figure out where we would go from there. Talk about something else that you think is big from the past 40 days.
Yeah, Donna, the governor sort of touched on this, but one of the bigger moments of the session was a moment that I call the hallelujah moment for Democrats. How often do you hear Democrats cheering a Governor Kemp move? Well, they did when he decided to use his budget to fully fund the Hope Scholarship. It used to be at 90%. There is now a push to make it 100% in the state budget. And this is something that has been a debate under the Gold Dome, as you well know, since 2011, when Governor Nathan Deal at the time had to sign into law some slashes to the Hope Budget Scholarship Awards. They have now been fully restored, and a lot of students will be thankful for that.
Yeah. So it's been interesting to see what has come up and what hasn't over the. We came into the session thinking we might see some things with abortion or guns, and none of those things came up. Even when we didn't see the bills come in, we still thought maybe at the last minute something might come out.
That's exactly right. This is where we get into it's a 2-year session. I heard from people even in the halls today. They're like, well, it was pretty quiet this year, but it's a 2-year session. So a lot of concern about more gun measures and more abortion measures in the second half of this session. But we heard very early from House Speaker John Burns that he did not want to see abortion legislation as long as it is before the courts. And we had arguments just yesterday at the Georgia Supreme Court about the abortion bill, and so which has obviously gone into effect. It's got a legal challenge against it. Burns didn't want to see anything until that's been decided. When it is decided, that's going to really, depending on how it goes, that could really put these Republican lawmakers back on the hot seat and under intense pressure from their base to move something similar again.
Yeah. Anything else you can think of that we thought?
Well, I think that's a great point. For the most part, there was a truce on culture wars this session. No abortion restrictions, no new expansions on guns, religious liberty, as of this moment, still hasn't come back up in a major way. Other measures that social conservatives were fighting for that many Democrats and even, frankly, some moderates didn't like, haven't moved forward. The closest you had, of course, was the transgender youth legislation, which was very important. But it wasn't a broader effort far beyond that with a lot of the issues that we've been talking about for years on this program.
But that bill in itself has proved to be a sticking point for the Democrats and may have hampered some other movement on some other bills.
So much so that Democrats are voting, as of this moment, in a block against sports betting legislation in protest of that measure. You know, that they were warning on the floor of the Senate and the floor of the House that it could damage mental health and it could cost lives.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see what moved and what didn't, and the kind of session it's been. I mean, if you had to look back on it, I mean, how would you describe this session? I think I look at it as it was a chance for the new leadership to really kind of feel each other out and find their footing.
I completely agree. These are two new leaders in Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and House Speaker John Burns, who were brand new in their jobs. And Speaker Burns didn't know that he would be the speaker until December. And so he had just a few weeks to get his office together, to get a plan together, to think about how he wanted to conduct his speakership. He was very close with Speaker Ralston. So it's been quite a bit of continuity, but it has felt like this is both sides really sizing each other up, who's going to have the power, who's going to be able to call the final shot. And that feels like even up until midnight, we're still going to be getting those answers.
Yeah, or even later.
Or even
a little later.
Yes.
So the Senate, and we just showed some video, the Senate is back in. Right now they're looking at some local consent bills, but who said 9 o'clock might be the bewitching hour in terms of where we might
I believe that was Senator Dugan who told us that.
We may see some things happen about that time. And then the House is still out and we're still waiting for them to come back in. But it's one of those, it's kind of an exciting night in that you just don't know what to expect. And if you're good with all of that.
Exciting, anxiety-ridden. Ask the lobbyists how they feel about it. But back to your point earlier, we really don't know the dominant issue of the session. 2019, it was abortion. 2020, it was the pandemic and the beginning of the pandemic and the public health crisis. 2021, it was the election law. 2022 is all about getting Republicans wanted to get Governor Kemp reelected. This session is sort of a fresh start. We're still trying to feel out how legislative leaders are going to handle crisis situations, and we're going to find out tonight how they do.
Okay. Well, now it's time for us to return to the Capitol. Rochelle has an interview with Democratic Representative Mary Margaret Oliver. Rochelle?
Yes, Donna, standing here with Representative Mary Margaret Oliver. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to get right to the first thing is I was pretty surprised to see what happened with Senate Bill 233. The fact that it was tabled, it's going back to the committee to be discussed. Were you surprised by that as well?
I wasn't surprised. I knew that putting it on the table would give them another option if they got enough votes. I think they're still counting votes as of about 7:30, so they may or may not bring it back to the floor for a full vote later.
What do you think the issue is with SB 233?
Well, it's a very complicated issue. Are we going to give another $250 million to private schools? And those areas of the state that are very low income areas that have no private schools, we're taking that $200 million away from them. So it's a real have and have-nots analysis, and the vote has been pretty negative so far. So I know they've been twisting arms today. I know that they want to pass this, even though it affects, I'm not sure how many people, but a $6,500 incentive to parents to take their children out of public school and maybe an incentive to homeschool them sounds like a big change of our education policy. I'm a public school person, so I'm for public schools and not another several $100 million to our private school industries.
Now, obviously, I can't let you go without obviously talking about HB 520 that's been on your heart, and you've partnered with Representative Todd Jones on this as well. Are you a little frustrated that you haven't seen it come up today?
I'm very discouraged right now. You know, it's 7:40 p.m. and we get no indication that the Senate is going to send us any mental health reform in 2023. You know, tens of thousands of people have been following our process, our 300-page report, our significantly forward-moving mental health reform bill, and we're getting nothing back from the Senate. I know there's a few hours left, but right now I'm pretty discouraged.
Yeah, and you know, there's been a lot of talk about it because you think about the late Speaker, David Ralston. This was a mission of his. There's a lot of bipartisan support on this as well. Why do you think there is what's the holdup?
I think the holdup is political gamesmanship. I think the holdup is political hostage-ing. I think the Lieutenant Governor is committed to what his issues are, and I see no expression of interest from the Senate in improving mental health reform in Georgia. And I'm hoping the rest of the evening I'll be proven wrong on that.
Well, the good news is you have several hours left, right? So anything could obviously happen. I want to thank you so much, Representative Mary Margaret Oliver, for joining us here on Lawmakers, and I'm going to send it back to the studio to Donna.
Thank you
so much, Rochelle. So let's get into that. Let's start with the mental health bill. She called it, she's discouraged over it. She says it's political gamesmanship.
Well, Donna, we first found out the mental health package was in dire trouble last week. Around the same time, the House and Senate were bickering back and forth over that hospital legislation that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones wants to press so badly. I was told at the time, and others were told as well, that the mental health reform package could be caught in the crossfire. Now we're seeing what that means. Now we've heard from Lieutenant Governor just a few minutes ago, earlier on the show, that he does not think that the entire package will pass the Senate. Maybe parts of it will be kind of diced and sliced and passed in other bills, but the major package won't happen. That's going to be a big sticking point after the session for House Republicans who see this as a legacy initiative for the late House Speaker David Ralston.
Yeah, there's that, and they had the commission over the summer that really looked into this. And the big issue was workforce issues, really. So you had the bill from last year and not enough people to fill those spaces, or enough beds to take care of the people who need the help.
Yeah, the reality is that Todd Jones, who's the Republican House member who's been leading this effort, says that he gets calls every day from families in Georgia begging him to help get a family member into a bed for inpatient treatment, and there just aren't the beds. And so they've had this commission, they had their study group over the summer. This has been a multi-year effort, and it's designed to be an ongoing multi-year effort. So to miss a year in this plan of kind of an arc reaching up to a crescendo of full funding for this mental health care effort is, you could hear it, it's just heartbreaking for people who have been pulling for this and working toward it very diligently for years, and again, for no obvious reason other than the fact that the House has stopped a bill that the Senate wants, and now the Senate is going to stop a bill that the House wants.
This is where that political gamesmanship really comes in. So we'll talk more in a moment, but we're going to go back to the Capitol now. Rochelle has Senator John Albers. Rochelle?
Here we go. Hi, Donna. Yes, I'm standing here with Senator John Albers. I really want to talk to you about some of the tough on crime bills that we've seen come from Republicans. Earlier today, we had the cash bail discussion. You think about the gang recruitment and jail time, mandatory jail time for that. Some people say that this actually rolls back some of the criminal justice reform that we've seen. What's your response to that?
Actually, I think it's the exact opposite. This is criminal justice reform, right? We want to be the #1 place to do business, but to do that, we have to be the safest place to operate your business and to raise your family. So we did some great things over time under both Governor Deal and Governor Kemp. Governor Kemp has continued to lead, though, in making sure we're protecting ourselves from those we are afraid of, not necessarily those that we're mad at.
Some would maybe argue that tough on crime, obviously everybody wants to live in a safe community, but people also want to get paid well. So Democrats have been saying, well, we have all these tough on crime issues, why not raise wages? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, those are completely separate from each other. And I think if you look at the reason why people continue to move to Georgia and are leaving the West Coast and they're living the Northeast is because they're in communities that are not safe, they're overly burdensome with the regulations. They want to come down to a place like Georgia where they can raise their family safely, they can be in a community and work their business in a place they feel good about. And that's what we provide uniquely as Georgia. So they don't have any relationship in my mind.
Okay. And then I do want to ask you very briefly before I let you go. Obviously, we saw some movement, some compromise when it comes to the 2024 budget. Are there things in there that you're very excited about? What are those? And then what are the things that you're still apprehensive of?
Well, I work very closely on the public safety and criminal justice part of the budget through the Senate. I'm very proud of the enhanced raises we got to give our law enforcement. Obviously, that's extraordinarily competitive. However, we also want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for our law enforcement officers. Our state law enforcement continues to need to move up the scale. I think we invested properly in our priorities. Again, we have a balanced budget with no deficit here in the state of Georgia. And I don't have any concerns. We funded HOPE 100%. We have education funded 100%. I think, again, Georgia came to the table and did what's right. That's why we're one of the most fiscally responsible states in the entire nation.
All right. Well, I know you have a very long night ahead of you, so I'm going to let you go. Senator John Albers, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. All right, Donna, back to you.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. So we can talk about a lot of tough on crime this session, right? We saw a lot of bills that some people, well, the Democrats are not happy about.
Yes, that's right. It's interesting that Senator Albers, on some of these bills, particularly the gang recruitment, the gang violence bills, worked with Fani Willis on some pieces of those bills. DAs have come to the State House and State Senate and said, we need more resources, we need more specific laws in order to detain this specific discrete group of people who were not able to detain based on the way the laws are currently written. That obviously has raised concerns among other Democrats who say, this doesn't sound specific to us. This sounds too broad. This is not the kind of legislation that we're looking for. I would say the most controversial bill that we've seen that is kind of comes under this umbrella of tough on crime is the prosecutor bill, creating state oversight over locally elected district attorneys. Fani Willis was not on board with that bill, very, very upset about that, completely against it, but something that Governor Kemp laid out as a priority and that House House and Senate Republicans were just about unanimous on that that's something that they want to create, and not just state oversight, but a commission appointed by Republicans to oversee these DAs, many of whom are newly elected Democrats.
Yeah, we're going to really be looking to see how this all plays out.
We will, and look, taken as a holistic, sort of all-encompassing approach, we're seeing a very different style when it comes to criminal justice than we saw under 8 years of former Governor Nathan Deal, who advocated for a different way to treat nonviolent offenders, steering them away from prison sentences. They haven't gone away from that move completely, but instead you're hearing Republican leaders like Governor Brian Kemp and his allies talk about crackdowns on violent criminals, on violent offenders, on going after prosecutors who they see as too progressive, too woke, or too inept to do their job. So we're definitely seeing a different style of leadership when it comes to criminal justice.
Okay. Well, we're going to return to the Capitol, where Rochelle Ritchie now has Democratic Senator Josh McLaurin. Rochelle.
That's right, Donna. And I want to ask you, Senator, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. But I wanted to start with you about something I haven't really asked a lot of people about tonight, is about the Prosecutor Oversight Committee. What are your thoughts on that? Because there were a lot of Democrats who were feeling that this was just a problem for a handful of communities and that it wasn't something that we were seeing across the board in Georgia.
Yeah, so this is a really good example of how the same policy ideas can change depending on what the intention is behind them. Because several years ago, I actually supported a prosecutorial oversight commission and voted for it and worked closely with Republicans to tinker with some of the language and make it in what I thought was fair. At that time, I was less concerned than some of my colleagues. I was in the vast minority of my colleagues in terms of voting for that bill. But things have changed for me. I think that the last couple of years have cast a new light on this effort, and it's not just this bill. You've seen other efforts to regulate prosecutors, like introduction of recall bills or bills that would make currently partisan prosecutors nonpartisan. And I think that these bills are an attempt to undermine a handful of prosecutors, as you suggested, in the state. And I feel like I have, if I say so myself, a little more credibility in saying this than Republicans might want me to have, because I did support an earlier version of this bill. But like I said, sometimes politics will change the way that the intention behind a bill develops. And I'm just not comfortable this year with the way that these prosecutorial bills are being introduced and deployed.
What's your overall sentiments on the tough on crime bills that Republicans have pushed through?
I've said over and over again that I really respected the way that Governor Nathan Deal addressed criminal justice reform because he knew, and he went to accountability courts and places like diversionary programs where people were getting second chances, and it would bring tears to his eyes. He understood that these are human beings first and foremost, even if they do make mistakes and commit crimes. And so, his trajectory was to make the system more geared towards rehabilitation and not more punitive. Unfortunately, I think this governor has taken sort of the opposite approach, and a lot of the bills that have come through have included mandatory minimums, increases in the scope of cash bail, which means that people are forced to go to jail unless they can afford to get out. So it's basically a way of criminalizing poverty. We've been moving in the wrong direction now for a couple of years on this stuff, and so I've been vocal, going to the House and the Senate over and over again to say there's a better way to do this, and your own administration, a Republican administration, showed you the way, but we just have to get back to the faith that Governor Deal had and believing in people and their ability to change.
All right, and the last question I want to ask you. Now, usually Sine Die goes for many, many hours, and earlier today you actually made a motion to adjourn. Were you serious, or were you just kind of trolling?
Like with most things in the Gold Dome, you sort of try something out to see what sticks. I think there was a lot of will in that body to go ahead and adjourn early, because it is true that the only constitutional requirement we have is to pass a budget. None of these other bills are constitutionally required. And there's been a little bit of playful infighting, you could say, between the House and the Senate this year on who's passing enough bills from the other side.
Yeah.
So I thought at the very least it would be fun. Now, we started playing with live ammunition, though, because, Senate Governor Jones said this motion's in order. We almost had a vote on it, but when my own minority leader went to the well and said, all right, that's enough,
okay.
I figured I'd follow my leader, Butler, and go ahead and withdraw the motion.
All right, well, Senator, thank you so much for joining us here on Lawmakers. Donna, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thanks so much, Rochelle. So yeah, a little fun today with that, but the serious issue of the budget, they really did. That's the only constitutionally mandated thing they have to do, and they got it done. Lots of good things in there. But the university system may not be happy with some of the money they lost. You want to talk about that a little
Donna,
bit?
This goes all the way back to what we were discussing earlier, the hospital deregulation measure that Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones pushed for. He was very upset, and so were some of his allies, that $105 million in a previous budget went towards upgrading a medical system that could benefit Wellstar Health. Wellstar Health care system is also against this hospital deregulation. So it all goes back to that. But in a sense, lawmakers compromised on the size of the cuts. Instead of $105 million, $66 million, but that's still going to hurt, and there's still a lot of people worried and concerned about what that means.
Yeah, and then there was, I'm not sure how to describe this, but there was some funding to universities that they feel that they still have some money from last year that they can make up.
Yes, there was a lengthy debate during the budget conversation on the Senate floor, and the Senate budget covers every piece of state funding, but I would say 90% of the debate was about university funding and funding for the university system. And I'm going to agree with Greg here. This is all about that Certificate of Need program. Wellstar's opposition to that because they have a hospital neighboring the hospital that Burt Jones' family has talked about building in Butts County. They oppose that. They oppose lifting the Certificate of Need. They are also partnering with Augusta Medical Center on a larger program as well as this program, but that's all done through, when Augusta University is getting involved in it, that comes through the university system of Georgia. So any cuts to that are really, it's just like a braid basically. So they're all braided all together. And so we hear that conversation on the Senate floor today. And now the questions are, now how is the university system funded? Is it true we don't have a say over the contracts that they're signing? Maybe this is an issue that we should revisit next year. So you can really see them laying the groundwork to maybe come back for the university system and take a deep dive into how exactly are you getting money and how exactly are you paying your bills and where is it all going. You can sort of see the groundwork being laid for that.
Okay, well, we're going to return to the Capitol where Rochelle Ritchie now has Minority Leader James Beverly. Rochelle.
That's right, Donna, here with House Minority Leader James Beverly. First of all, thank you so much for joining us. One of the things I want to ask you is, what are your sentiments overall for this session?
I think it's been interesting. You know, we have a new speaker, a new lieutenant governor, and it's been interesting. I think we tried on our part to try to be bipartisan as much as we could. I think the session was fast, but it was slow at the same time because a lot of bills didn't come. They got sort of compressed into a space where we're now dealing with a bunch of stuff. But I think that's a result of the new speaker. But overall, I'm pretty impressed by my caucus' ability to stay together, and so I'm excited about the future for the Democrats in the state of Georgia.
Now, there's been a little bit of frustrations between both houses, the Senate and the House, obviously. The Senate more so because there's been fewer House bills that have been ruled on. Why do you think that is, and is that having an impact on how bills are moving through the House today?
Yeah, I think quite frankly, I think the lieutenant governor and the speaker are trying to figure out what their sort of play is, and so we get caught in the crossfire on some foolishness that they're doing, and that's it's to be expected. I mean, you got two new guys trying to figure out who has whatever, and while we're trying to figure out how do we get business, the base of the pyramid done. So how do we deal with healthcare reform? How do we deal with the cash bail? All those things that we really trying to do as Democrats gets pushed to the side because these guys got to figure out what the ecosystem looks like in the Republican Party.
Now, earlier today, we saw SB 63, which passed, which addresses cash bail. There's been a lot of what Democrats call tough on crime bills coming from Republicans. You think about the mandatory jail time for gangs, the oversight committee for prosecutors. Do you think that is the right direction that we need to be going in Georgia?
Absolutely not. I think that what happened with, Governor Deal, for what we disagree with, and I was here when I served under Governor Deal. He was a guy who was principled around the way in which he dealt with not just mental health, but also how he dealt with the criminal justice system. And they're rolling all that stuff back. And so as you start to move into a more conservative Georgia, the numbers of Georgia are changing. We're excited about the demographic changes, but there's some people just hold on to those cultural warfares, and I think they went too far. And they're starting to try to roll back stuff. I think the public is going to say, enough is enough. We don't need this in Georgia anymore. If we're going to be the best state to do business, we got to have health care, and we got to make sure that the criminals that we really are criminals, y'all get locked up. But some people just need to have a second chance and make sure that we're doing the right thing by them. And I think Georgia's going to speak to that next year real soon.
Now, expanding health care has always been a part of your agenda.
Absolutely.
Haven't seen much of that this session. Your thoughts?
Shame on those guys. Shame on those guys. You're talking about 500,000 Georgians right now without health insurance. As Medicaid unwinds, another 500,000 people are probably going to lose health insurance through no fault of their own, and nobody's talking about it. They put, lipstick on a pig is still a pig, and the governor needs to really step up and say, listen, we can do this. You have 500,000 Georgians without health care right now, and all you have to do is expand Medicaid. You got hospitals closing down, and that's all a result of this guy not doing what's necessary for the state of Georgia, and it's unconscionable, and it's a shame on him.
All right, well, House Minority Leader James Beverly, thank you so much. I know you're about to run back in there because there's something happening with SB 233, it sounds like. So I know you got a busy night ahead. Thank you again for joining us.
Excellent.
All right, thank you. All right, Donna, I'm going to send it back to you.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. And so she told us about something with House Bill 233. We'll be checking to see. The voucher bill is in the House right now, I'm hearing. So real quick, not much time. What didn't make it?
Well, so far, the anti-Semitism bill that would define anti-Semitism so it could apply to Georgia's Hate Crimes Act, where we're watching that very closely, see if it has traction. I heard it could, but we'll find out tonight.
Okay. What about from you?
So obviously the mental health care bill, we will look to see if any pieces of that go tonight. Maybe, maybe not. Also, there was one of the most lobbied bills down at the Capitol this year was on truck weights, increasing the maximum amount that trucks could drive around the state on state and local roads. There was such strong pushback from mayors and county commissioners who said, we know that's going to basically destroy our roads and bridges. We're going to have to rebuild them at a third faster rate, and we don't have the money for that. Who's going to pay for that? So that has really, it had a lot of momentum coming into the session, and it has gotten a lot of pushback, and that seems like it's gotten so, I'll put it this way, it's in conference committee at 8 o'clock on sine die, so we'll have to see where that goes.
And the farmers really wanted that bill.
Farmers
they really wanted that bill.
The courts wanted it, yeah.
The other thing, you AJC, we don't have a lot of time to talk about it, the House Bill 404 that dealt with trying to improve housing, rental housing. We thought we might hear something today. I guess there's still a possibility, and that is to make sure that it's called the Safe House Act, so that housing must be fit for habitation.
And there's a lot of institutional forces against it, and one of the reasons why, there's a lot of lawmakers who are also landlords.
Interesting. Well, we've got still a lot of the night left down there at the Capitol, and we'll keep you informed. Greg and Patricia, as always, thank you so much for coming on the show. That does it for Lawmakers for this General Assembly 2023. A couple dozen hardworking professionals, both here at GPB in the studio and at Georgia at the Capitol, put together Lawmakers each of the 40 days, except for the two of us that you see in front of the camera. There are lots of people behind the scenes, and I want to thank them all for all they do to make this show interesting and informative to Georgians throughout the state. The show airs on 9 television stations. Have a great night.